everyone. Welcome to the Dream Catcher podcast, a place where your dreams can find a voice. Our soul's journey is ultimately about awakening to our potential and our authenticity. But that journey is not always easy. According to my guest, Mark Nepo, it's a process that takes place through the labor of a lifetime as we develop into fully realized beings. And his new book, The Book of Soul, 52 Paths to Living What Matters, is a powerful guide that can assist us in this transformation. Mark Nepo is a poet and philosopher who has taught in the fields of poetry and spirituality for over 40 years. A #1 New York Times best-selling author, he has published 22 books, and his work has been translated into 20 languages. Mark has been interviewed several times by Oprah Winfrey and Robin Roberts for Good Morning America. In 2015, he was given a Lifetime Achievement Award by AgeNation. He was also chosen as one of OWN's SuperSoul 100, a group of inspired leaders using their gifts and voices to elevate humanity. In this interview, Mark and I are going to discuss several themes from his book, including the role of courage, inspiration, creativity, and kindness in the evolution and elevation of our souls, and how we can use it to experience the truth, harmony, and depth of life. And if you like what you heard, please don't forget to like, rate, share, and subscribe to this podcast. Thanks. Hello, Mark. How are you?
It's great to be with you. I'm fine, thank you. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you. I just want to thank you for being on the show. I absolutely love your work. The Book of Awakening, which I believe you wrote in the early 2000s, that was by my bedside for many years. And I just want to thank you so much for creating that gem.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It's, as all the books are, I say they're great teachers for me. So retrieving them, I become their student.
Okay. So today we're going to be discussing some of the themes that you covered in your new book, The Book of Soul, 52 Paths to Living What Matters. And that, again, such a beautifully written book. Mark, I was savoring every single line. Oh my goodness. And I noticed that just like your previous books, you take readers on a journey. So could you share how this book evolves where other books leave off?
Well, it's interesting, because I've been blessed to be prolific because I learned a long time ago that I write about what I need to learn about. It's really an exploration, and what I share are examples, not instructions. So each book leads me further in this path, and looking back, they all make a lot of sense. Looking forward, I'm just learning what I need to learn. So looking back, you look back 20 years or more to the Book of Awakening, and the next book after that was The Exquisite Risk.
Mhm.
And so once you're awake, I had to learn how to take risks. And the next book after that was my book on inner courage. Well, once I'm awake and I take a risk, I need to learn how to be more courageous. And then it was 7,000 ways to listen. So looking back, it all makes sense, because once you're present and once you take a risk, then we have to listen. And so, and all my books just kind of, when I look back, they make all this sense. And I think the Book of Soul, there were two things about it that opened me to its journey. One was a metaphor about birth, which is in the beginning of the book, which gave me a way in. And that, we're all here, thankfully, to the great courage and love of our mothers who physically bring us into the world. And I started just to think about that, and that once we're here, we go through a second labor, which is the labor of experience. And that is how here on earth we birth our soul once we're here. And so that gave me a real way. And what the book wound up being was, looking at many of the different lessons that I've been learning through the years, this was a book that allowed me to integrate all of those and look at them and take some of those lessons further. Um, and the last chapter, as you know, in the new book, in the Book of Soul, is called "The Temple is the World," and I think
Mm-hmm.
that was such a lesson for me in that all the different ways we gather, whether it's informally here or with loved ones or in a church or a mosque or a synagogue or a sangha or wherever it might be, those are wonderful, and they are incubators so that if we love well, the walls fall down and the temple is the world. It's not in any one place, it's everywhere. And that was really the big learning from this book is to for me to commit myself even more fully through my teaching to that, to having that space, that sacred space, come alive wherever we are between us.
Right, right. And I love the last chapter that you talked about because it really speaks to the importance of community. Because I feel like that is something that's really lost these days because no one really meets face to face. Like everything is online now, especially with COVID and everything. So I think bringing that to the forefront and really expressing the importance of that is I'm sure that people will really resonate with that message.
Well, thank you. There's a few books back. There was a book I did that was all focused on community called "More Together Than Alone," and
Yeah,
I, yeah, and I was, researching um, moments when we are really do well together throughout history and cross culturally, and that was an amazing teacher too.
yeah, yeah. And I have to ask, as I'm a writer myself, and I aspire to write like someone like you. I mean, your writings are so beautiful. It's clear that you're a poet at heart. And I'm just curious, what is your creative process like? How do you get all these ideas?
Well, this goes all the way back to um, this year I turned 70, which I
Yeah.
thought was really ancient when I was young. It doesn't seem so old right now. But when I was in my 30s, as you know from my work, I almost
Yes.
died from a rare form of lymphoma. And
Yes, yes, I
be-
read that. Yeah.
before that, like all artists and whatever the form, I was taught by other writers and in school and in program, be on the look for good material, and but almost dying gave me the lens of the miraculous, that everything, there isn't any, I could write about a fly on the window. It doesn't,
Yes. And you can make that profound. That's just incredible. Like you're
well,
able
it's
to
not
touch on those
making,
nuances.
yeah, and so I would say it's not making it profound. It's then if we can be, you or I or anyone can be present enough, open our heart and be present enough, the miracle of whatever's before us shows itself. So it's not about, oh, let me see is this worth writing about, or how can I position this or manipulate it to be significant. It's about me being open enough, and this is where all the spiritual practices and meditation and being present then reveals the miracle that's hiding in the open. And then I go, oh my God, it was all right there. And so the books really are, and the poems are taking notes. And I think the biggest thing is that, you know, I'm committed that I only write from a heart space,
Yeah. And that
not a
really
head
comes through. That really comes through.
space.
Because nowadays, when you take writing classes, a lot of them talk about um, kind of making your writing more simplistic, sort of like, I hate to say it, but kind of dumbing down your writing so that it's more
Mhm.
accessible to people. And to read books like yours is so refreshing because you're not afraid to take those risks and use that kind of language, the metaphors that you use and everything. I mean, you have to take time to really think about the ideas that you present. And for me, that was just so refreshing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I think that it's so important to, you know, up here when we're mental, that's one thing, and we can relate through our these amazing things we have, the minds. But when we speak from the heart, that immediately, a metaphor and story and just being authentic,
Mhm.
we immediately have a heart connection.
Yes. Yes. And Mark, I want to start talking about some of the themes that you covered in this book, and you've covered a lot. But one recurring theme that I noticed is about the role that fear plays when it comes to preventing our soul's full expression. And you mentioned a couple of them throughout the chapters. Could you please describe some of them to us and how they impact us?
Sure. And fear is natural when it's right sized. Fear is what allows us to know that there's real danger. But what we often do as human beings, and this I think is the biggest thing, and I know these things because I do them all the time, just because I know a lot or I've experienced a lot doesn't mean no one's exempt. It's how do we practice when, oh, there it is again. Oh, right, I recognize this. So one of the things about fear is, if I burn my hand on a stove, well, oh, okay, I need to recognize if I get within an inch of that, that's legitimate danger. But what then I tend to do as a human being is we inflate our experience and our fear. We make it bigger. I go, well, you know what? To be safe, I'm going to make sure I stay a foot away from the stove. And okay, that's fine. That's being cautious. But then something happens. Now I tell myself that that's the real distance. The real distance was an inch. I added the other 11 inches to be safe, cautious. But now so we all have a legitimate ring of safety, but we add a ring of fear, and the what keeps us from life and from uh, being all of who we are is when we tell ourselves that's the real distance. So I add it even further. Now I make it further away. And so let's replace the stove with love. I
Hmm.
burn my hand or my heart on love. So I could learn how to better be skilled at love, or I can say, you know what? Stay away from that. Yeah, that's no good, boy. Don't go there. And then I make it even bigger. Now it's 3 feet. And
Hmm.
then what happens is now I can't reach you. I've made this added distance, and now I start saying, boy, not only is there fear to be negotiated, but now I'm alone. I'm isolated. Oh, life is so lonely.
Yeah.
You see what we're doing to ourselves, and and this is where the risk, the exquisite risk, to go all the way back to that early book is one of the uh, great things about the Buddhist tradition is their notion of seeing things as they are, which
Yeah.
is at once the hardest and simplest practice. But it's so important for all of us because when I can see things as they are and go, oh no, you know what? I added all that distance. If I need to be in touch in life, I have to see things as they are. Oh, it was only an inch. Oh, well, now I have real choices again. And now I have to. So what happens in life for all of us, and this is kind of like spiritual physics, I think. Um, we all have to survive and thrive. So in order to survive in the outer world, we do have to manage risk. Like if we were
Yeah.
having this conversation on the street, we'd have to look, make sure we don't get hit by a truck. That's managing risk. But inside, the way that we come alive is we have to enhance risk. I have to take a risk to go out and be touched by another, to be touched by life, to feel the miracle that is everywhere. So each of us has to negotiate between managing risk and enhancing risk, because managing risk helps us survive. But if we don't thrive, what's the point?
I agree, and it really limits us, right? There are only so many things that we'd be willing to do because, as you said, fear essentially is like a shackle, right? It prevents you from doing so many things. Like in a relationship, if you have fear of intimacy, getting close to someone, it can prevent you from having that really deep, meaningful connection with another human being. And I also want to touch on something that a fear that everyone's having right now with COVID. It's about uh, I think that is also having an impact on people and kind of trying to figure out how they can manage that risk of
Well,
stepping out into the world.
I think that, especially with the pandemic, there is a challenge, of course,
Yeah.
inherent in this time, and there's a great opportunity. So we're being challenged to face ourselves,
Yeah.
to face life, to see things as they are. There's no running, and yet fear is the other virus.
Hmm.
Fear is the other
Exactly.
virus that's everywhere. And so, I think one of the things that's happened in this unusual time, in the Jewish tradition, the word Sabbath literally means the one day we don't turn one thing into another.
Yeah.
And I think what the pandemic has done is forced us into a global Sabbath. We can't run from here to there. We can't make 30,000 plans. We can't even dream too big. We have to see the miracle, and we have to stop and not turn one thing into another and go, oh, it's all right here. It's all right here. How do we regain that? And even though we're physically distanced at times, how do we feel our kinship with all other life? Because it's all, that old thing about the choice between love and fear. If we let fear govern us, well, then it's everywhere. I mean, I know just from my own life that I've learned that fear is to be moved through, not obeyed. To be
It's
moved
to be
through.
moved through and not obeyed.
If I'm afraid and I ask my fear, what should I do? It'll say, be more afraid.
Exactly. It's like a snowball, right? It just
Yes.
keeps getting worse.
So no, I ask my heart, I ask my spirit, I ask my friends, I'm afraid, help me. I can't shake this fear. Well, be with people you love. Right size our fear. Let me share this parable. It's an old anonymous teaching story, Hindu teaching story about fear and pain. And I love these old anonymous stories. So there's a master and apprentice, always. And the master finds the apprentice very annoying because all he does is complain, complain, complain. So the master says to the apprentice, get a handful of salt, put it in a glass of water, and bring it to me. So he does. And the master says, oh, well, drink from the glass. He spits it out. The master says, what's the matter? He says, oh, it's bitter. Master says, get the same amount of salt, put it in your hands, and follow me quietly. So the apprentice cups the handful of salt, follows the master, who leads him to a lake. He says, put the salt in the lake. He does. He says, drink. He kneels down, he scoops the water, it dribbles down his chin, and the master goes, well? He says, oh, it's fresh. And the master looks at the apprentice, he says, stop being a glass, become a lake.
Oh,
Stop,
it's
stop
such a
being a
great
glass.
story.
become a lake. So I love this anonymous, ancient, before schools, before degrees, right? This is
That's how
how
people learned. Yeah.
that's how people learn. And
Hmm.
so what is that? I mean, the reason that it touches me is what I hear in that story is that everyone gets their salt. No one is exempt. That is our pain, our fear. But when you put it in a small container, not only is it get bigger and sharper, but we can get bitter.
Yeah.
So we may hear this story and go, oh, well, it's not good to be a glass. I won't do that. Yes, we will, because that's how pain and fear say hello. They make us go like this,
Exactly.
tighten. But what we can do is right size our fear, our pain. And how do we do that? By enlarging our sense of things. Stop being a glass, become a lake. So the question is, for each of us and those listening, what's in your toolbox? What is it that you can turn to when you're afraid or in pain that enlarges your sense of things? Is it reading? Is it writing? Is it meditating? Is it going for a walk in nature? Is it listening to music? Is it playing music? Is it gardening? Is it being with family? What is it that you have that you can turn to enlarge your sense of things?
I love that. I love that. And I want to talk about something you wrote in chapter 14, which is one of my favorite chapters. You talk about the two types of fires that we encounter daily. The first is the fire of aliveness, and the second is the fire of circumstances. So,
Yes.
Mark, how do we distinguish between these two?
Well, this is it. So first so the fire of aliveness is how do we feed the fire of our soul? That fire has to keep being fed constantly. How do we keep that light inside alive? But in the world, there is actual fire. There's fire of circumstance. There's difficult situations that are hurtful. And that fire needs to be doused. So yes, this is one of the kind of practices each person has to personalize. How do we know the difference? Well, and I think one of the things that I return to and first off, let me say, like I said earlier, what I share are examples, not instructions. So I struggle with this myself. So I think that one of the things is I always ask myself with whatever's before me, is this heartening or disheartening? If it's heartening, even if it's difficult, say we're in a friendship and we have to have a difficult conversation to move forward. Well, if it's heartening, then I'm in because that's feeding the fire of aliveness. If
And
it's
that's like a
dis
sensation you feel? It's a sensation that you feel,
it's a feeling of truth. So let
the feeling of
let me
truth.
share this and we'll come back to that. So if it's disheartening, then what am I doing there? Then that's hurtful. Then that's life draining. So if it's life giving, it's feeding the fire of aliveness. If it's life draining, it's feeding a fire that will hurt us. So how do we know? What you're asking is, how do we know what is true experience? Well, I think that this is that each person has to build on their first hand experience. And I actually, so in other words, if I'm by a lake and I put my hand in the water, I, I don't need proof that it's wet. I know it's wet. My hand's in the water, I know it's wet. So there's a certain irreducible part of experience that we know in our heart what is true. If I feel love, I know that's love. And I don't have to unravel it or question it. And so that when I have those experiences, I say, okay, this is true. And then when I have another one, I can build, oh, that's true. So start to build my own sense of what's true.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things in our world today, all over the world, especially in America, we are in this very strident time where we have people who are, whole groups of people who are not grounded in reality.
That's what I was going to ask. They're pretty disconnected from themselves. So it's like,
Well,
how would they know, right?
Well, I think this is where I think one of the important things of I've been thinking about this recently. I think one of the important things of education in all forms is that we have to restore people's direct connection and experience of life. Because I think right now, with all of the virtual realities and the social media and everything, and if you don't have an actual connection, people are spinning, and people are mistaking intensity for meaning. It's just intense. It doesn't
Exactly.
mean
And
it.
even me, I mean, I consider myself pretty conscious, Mark, and I have to make a concerted effort to stop like working on my laptop and checking my social media and like step out in nature, meet people face to face. Because it does require concerted effort because the way the modern life is designed, you are going to be living in this virtual reality, you know?
Well, and I think that we have to restore, even through the virtual reality, what we feel and experience in our body, in our spirit, in our heart, in our mind is direct. And when we do experience something meaningful, we need to, so like we all know we stand on the earth, we breathe air from the sky. That's a fact. That's not debatable. We can talk about what that means to each of us, and we might view it differently. But those are so we've reached a point right now, almost like a perfect storm in the sense that psychic storm, in that there's, like I said, there's so many people that are not trusting their direct experience. And this is the if you go all the way back to Shakespeare and Hamlet, this is what Hamlet's story is really about. We it's so common, it's such a great story that we take it for granted, but this is what it's really about. It's a cautionary tale about trusting what you know in your heart and not unraveling it with your mind. Just imagine this story today. I mean, Hamlet is this talented, gifted, sensitive young man. He comes home one day to discover that his mother slept with his uncle and they killed his father. Oh my God. I mean, you really, lifetime of therapy right there, right? And what the story is really about is this is heartbreaking. It's devastating.
It is, yes.
And he knows in his heart that this is true and what he needs to do. He needs to act in some way, but every time he gets to a point of acting, he starts second guessing himself. He's, how do I know this is true? Well, maybe this wasn't. And he diffuses all of his heart energy and what he knows to be true until he finally, that's the famous point in the story. He said he even questions if he's like to be or not to be. That's like people today saying, well, is this real or is what I'm in the virtual, reality real? Which is real? And so, I think human beings have done this for a long time. It's every generation is different, but we have the challenge of how it's our turn. The pandemic is difficult. And, in my parents' generation, it was World War II. Every generation
Yes.
has a challenge. Are we going to show up and be fully here and choose love over fear and be more together than alone or not? And it's our turn.
It is our turn. Yes. Yes. Thank you for sharing that, Mark. And one of the experiences that really caught my attention was the one where you met Steven Tyler from Aerosmith, and you talked about attending an Aerosmith concert and how the music and being in that space made you and made the people who were in that concert aware of their own gifts, how it has that kind of impact. So can you please speak more about this insight, please?
Yeah, so I think that, and and I was so blessed that Stephen was also kindly. He is a big fan of the Book of Awakening, and
Yeah,
he
yeah.
he had reached out to me, and we connected, and so he kindly had my wife Susan and I be a guest at one of his concerts, which was an amazing experience.
Yeah, I've been
And
to I've been to their concerts, so that's why it really was like, whoa, yeah,
oh yeah, and
I
so
get what he's saying.
he had this whole way he wanted us to experience. The first part
Yeah.
of it, we were in like front rows, and then he wanted us to come up and be on the side of the stage. So that was the place where I was standing. My wife and I were standing, and
Hmm.
when would I ever get that viewpoint? And I looked out at all these people, and I realized, for this brief moment, people, unless the people you came with, about them, but there's all these people, this short-term community. Yeah, people could be different religions, be different Democrat, Republican, this or that. Nobody knows. People were just there, and I realized, as gifted as Stephen is, more than anything, it was him being holding nothing back and being thoroughly himself that kind of brought that possibility alive for everyone there. And I think that we think we go to hear the music, we think we go to hear a poet speak, or to hear, a famous, or to watch a painter work or
Yes,
something. And we are, but it made me feel that at a deeper level, we're going to be inspired to be who we are by watching him be fully himself. It made me, and I think everyone there, say, "Oh, I can be myself too." And that, to go back, is feeding the fire of aliveness.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that is going back to feeding the fire of aliveness, that
Mhm.
we love to see people be who they are, because it reminds us that, oh, I can be completely who I am, whether I'm gifted or not. There's Aldous Huxley, who was a philosopher, um, and he wrote a novel called Antic Hay, and what it's about is, in like the early 1920s in London, there's a group of these writers and painters and artists who meet in a cafe all the time, like a salon. They do
Hmm.
their work and they come and talk. Well, the painter, who's the main character, he's not a very good painter, but his vision is, and his connection to directly to life, is exceptional. He's more alive than anybody. But he just is not skilled with paint. So the other people are very clever and bright and, very gifted in what they do. And they actually, without his realizing it, they get together and they make fun of him without him even knowing it. But the point that Aldous Huxley is making with the novel is, who's the real artist? The real artist is this painter, because he is so alive and so close to life. It doesn't matter whether he can mix red and blue. That's not what makes him an artist.
It's the passion, right?
It's how alive
Alive,
the
yeah.
engagement, his engagement with that creativity is the way to it brings us alive for being engaged in something. So in that way, everyone, if your heart is alive as a poet, the words are, you don't even have to write it down. The words just, I happen to write it down.
Right. And why is that important when it comes to awakening the soul?
Well, because that is so, this is how I think that our real purpose is our soul's awakening. Where that happens is our occupation. That can change. But I think that, if you look at, and this is both individually and collectively, so if you look at that every soul is like a cell in the global body. In my body, I'm healthy as long as I have one more healthy cell than toxic. I'd like a lot more. As long as I'm leaning in that direction, I'm healthy. Well, every soul is a cell in the global body. And when we can be who we are and be awake and be connected to life and recognize our kinship with other life, we come alive. Now, by coming alive, we are living our life, the one life we're given, which is another one of my books, The One Life We're Given. Not only is that important individually, but then we are helping keep humanity, the global body, healthy. So there's more healthy souls than toxic.
Yeah, and I love that about this book and your other books, because there's a deep embedded message of altruism and source of light in the world. And you, in this book, you talked about the importance of meaning, truth, and kindness, seeing them as our teachers. And Mark, I'd like to know, how do these qualities help us navigate life, and how can we increase our ability to rely on these qualities to help ourselves and others?
Yeah. So these things are not abstract. The only
Yeah.
three things are abstract is if we don't personalize them. They're
Yes.
more, like we have the elements, air, fire, earth, and water. Well, meaning, truth, and kindness are like spiritual elements. So meaning really comes to us through relation. We all have these relationship and presence and care. We all have access to those things. Through relationship, we discover meaning. Through presence, we discover truth. And through kindness, we discover care. So these are all of these available to us. When I'm present, we said before, how do I know if my experience is real? It's through presence, through being completely present, holding nothing back. If when I'm struggling or I'm confused or tangled in my mind, I stop whatever I'm doing and I give my full presence to whatever's before me until it becomes my teacher. And I renew my direct connection with life. Now, life paradoxically is so much more than just my experience. And this is
Yes.
where meaning comes in. This is where meaning comes in, because the only way I can experience what it's like for you to be alive is to be present, and meaning is relational. So here's a quick little story about meaning. A widower he's just can't get through his grief, and he goes and seeks out advice from an old woman who's a sage, and they sit by a stream, and he's just in despair, and she gives him a branch and tells him to put it in the water, and she says to him, "You're not touching the water, but you can feel the water through the branch, can't you?" And he says, "Yes." He says, "Now think of your wife long gone. You can't touch her, but you can feel her." Meaning is the branch in the water. Meaning is
Oh,
how meaning is how I can't be you, but I can feel you
feel you.
if I'm present enough, if I open my heart enough. So we can practice these things. You know, Mother Teresa said, courage is doing small things with love. We can practice these things by being completely present to whatever is needed right before us. Um, kindness um, and kinship share the same root. Here's another wonderful ancient anonymous story. It happens also to be Hindu. There are many others, but this one also happens to be. And this is about a man who's a, he's a holy man who doesn't know he's holy, and he's just a very simple man. And in India, in the uh, along the Ganges River at Varanasi, there's those steps that go down, and he's
Yep.
there with all the hundreds of people in the water praying. And all of a sudden, he sees a spider struggling next to him. So he stops, he leans down, he lifts the spider, and he goes to put it on the steps on the shore. But the spider is a poisonous spider, and it stings him. But because he's a holy man who doesn't know he's holy, he's stung but not poisoned. And he puts it on the thing. So the next day he's back in the river, and he's up to his thighs, and he's praying. There's the same spider. How does that happen? He leans over, he picks up the spider. Again, it stings him. Again, he puts it on the steps. The third day, he's the same. Of all the things, there's the same spider. He lifts the spider, and the spider looks at him and says, "Don't you understand? I am a spider. I will sting you every time because that is what I do." And the holy man who doesn't know he's holy says, "And don't you understand? I will save you every time because that is what I do." It's another ancient story, and the power of this is, of course,
It's
the
just who
love.
he is. That's just his
Just,
identity, right? Yeah.
it's just who he is. And one of the lessons of it is that the strength of our kindness dilutes the sting of the world.
Oh, yes.
The strength of our kindness dilutes the sting of the world. So in another culture, at another time, Mencius, who was an amazing philosopher, Chinese philosopher, about 300 BC, and he was trying to explain what this thing is in us, that's this kindness, and he couldn't put it into words, but he used this image. He says, if you were to come upon a child about to fall into a well, the urge in you to drop everything and save that child, that's our human kindness. And he said, with another metaphor, he said he believed that people are innately kind, the way that water will always flow downhill and join other water. Human beings, allowed their true nature, will always flow to each other and join. We can manipulate water to go sideways, even upside down, but allowed its true nature, water will just always flow and join other water. And we can manipulate each other or ourselves through, like we said earlier, about how we let fear get too big. We can manipulate ourselves away from our kindness. I don't know if it's safe to be kind. I don't know. But
Yeah,
allowed
because
our
there are
true
people
nature.
who take advantage of that. So, it's easy
Well,
to get cynical and to be cautious about
well,
expressing
and
kindness.
I have come to feel like I would rather be fooled than not believe, because the cost of not believing is greater than being hurt by being fooled.
Yeah, we need more people like that, like you, Mark.
Well,
We
we're
definitely
all
do.
we're all we're all we're all in this together, and we all have the same choice points all over and over again every day. I can have something happen after we get off of our conversation that will frighten me, or I'll get hurt, and then I'll become a glass, and I have to remember not to make that distance bigger, but to, I think one of the most quiet courages for all of us is when life pushes us away, we have to lean back in. When I close, I have to open. When I'm afraid, I have to still take a risk. And if I can't do it by myself, then I got to call you up and have you help me be strong enough to do it.
Yeah, so it's about having that courage to go back in and to believe people are good at their core.
So, a question for people who are listening to personalize meaning, truth, and kindness is,
Mm-hmm.
in a very specific way, can you describe one way that you're being asked to experience meaning? One way you're being asked to experience truth. One way you're being asked to be kind, in small ways. In small ways. Is it, if you see someone drop their groceries in the parking lot, is it going over and helping pick them up? Because we never know I believe that um, the universe and life keeps creating itself. And we never know what one gesture of kindness keeps the world going. It may be helping that person pick up their groceries. It may be listening to a stranger for 5 minutes. And we don't know if it's that one or the next one. So why not, lift the spider and put it on the shore?
Yeah. There's that saying, kill them with kindness. I don't know the complete saying, but I'm sure you've heard of it, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and actually that's such a weird, you know, use of the word kill.
I know,
It's
right?
bring alive with kindness.
Bring alive with kindness, yeah.
Bring alive with kindness, you know. I mean, it so permeates our culture, right? If we're moved, we say, I'm blown away.
Yes.
Well, that's crazy.
All right, Mark. We ended on such a beautiful note, and I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful insights that you've offered here today. And there's just so much to unpack in this book, so much to ponder on, and I'm just glad that we were able to cover some of it during our short time together.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It's a joy to be together. I wish you all the best.
Thank you. And I just want to let everyone listening know that Mark's new book is available at all major bookstores and his website, marknepo.com. And Mark, I believe that you have a webinar coming up soon,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, yes, thank you. So, I've been offering webinars, of course, I have started to go out again in person, which has been wonderful, but I'm continuing to give webinars. And so the next one is on 3 successive weeks, one a week, 3 sessions, January 29th, February 6th, and February 13th. And this is on the gift of relationship, the gift of relationship. And people can find out details and register at live.marknepo.com.
Okay. Got it. Just on time for Valentine's Day.
Yeah, right, right.
Okay, great. Mark, it's been an honor, a pleasure, and thank you again. Thank you so much. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
All right, you too. You too. Thank you so much. Take
Bye.
care.